Hello and welcome to another edition of Capital Calculus. I am your host Anil Padmanabhan. I am not sure how many of you know that India is in the middle of a very profound demographic transition. Mind you, I am not speaking about the bulge in India's population leaning towards the youth. As people say, 65% of India is less than 35 years of age. Instead, I am talking about the aging of India. And worse, this phenomenon is coming about faster than what we have been led to believe. This is largely because at one level, fertility levels are declining, and at the other end, longevity is improving. In fact, the United Nations Population Fund says that by 2050, a fifth of India will be over 60 years of age. And by then, India will not be a young country anymore. In fact, it will be middle age and old age population. According to their projection, there will be about 350 million senior citizens in India in 2050. This is a staggering number. It's more than the present population of the United States. Obvious question, is India prepared for this demographic phenomenon? Are we ready to deal with the profound social and economic challenges that will emerge, typically like making available sufficient quality and quantity of geriatric care, dealing with mental health stress, and so on? To answer all these questions and more, we have in our studios today Rajit Mehta. Rajit is the MD of Max India and MD and CEO of Antara Senior Living. He is also the chairperson of the Association of Senior Living in India. Welcome, Rajit.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you for having me on the show.
Okay, Rajit, I wanted to begin by setting the context. I briefly alluded to it in my intro. So India is aging, and you concur with that? And are there any regional state level variations?
I think first of all, I must say, Anil, that very few people in media are interested in this topic, right? And that surprises me sometimes. In fact, recently at a conference in the US, one of my friends from Pricewaterhouse was there, and he spoke about senior living in India, and people were surprised saying, is it? Is India paying attention to this? Right? So that, indicates to you. But thank you for picking this topic up. Sometimes I think it's almost like global warming. We don't feel the heat because the temperature goes up by a fraction every year. But when we see the consequences, right, then it starts to hit us. India is in a similar state today, as you rightly said yourself in your opening remarks. It's a scary picture actually, to have 1 in every 5 Indian being a senior in 2050, right? Even as you speak of today, our population of seniors is more than the population of Japan, right? So while you might say it's 8-10%, but it's a staggering number of about 15 crores, of seniors. And it has several implications. Yeah, there are regional variations surely. So you'll find states like Kerala where 16% of the population is senior, Tamil Nadu is 14%, Punjab, Himachal Pradesh is 13%, you have, Andhra Pradesh 13%. And there are some others like Assam or Bihar where there are 7-8%, right? Now these variations also have very important implications at state level, right? So let's look at economic compulsions. A fraction of India's population is covered by any formal pension scheme. So for these states where you have a high proportion of elders, they have to rethink about how do you finance retirement? How do you handle the healthcare burden? Where will the caregivers come from? And by the way, what about industrial activity? If half of the population is a senior, then what happens to the state? Should the state become almost like a country which issues golden visas to attract younger people? I don't know the answer. And then there is the issue of mental disorders, loneliness. So it's a very sordid picture at this point of time. And it takes a decade to prepare for this. So I think it's about time that everybody starts to pay attention to it, right? So that I think is the dimension of this issue for India.
So Rajit, glad you flagged Kerala because it's actually a nice laboratory to understand what is coming India's way. And I like the way you said that we don't recognize the problem because you don't really see it in very tangible terms. It's like an incoming tide. It'll be on you before you know.
Yeah.
So in Kerala's case, the questions you asked are very relevant. So it is an empty nest syndrome in Kerala. So you have an aging population, and there are no kids there. People have left because, like you said, it has zero manufacturing. It's the real nightmare scenario. But it's being fed by migrants from Odisha, Bihar, Andhra, and all these people are coming in Assam. So if you walk down the street, you will hear like the United Nations, a multitude of languages being spoken. But more amazing, they all picked up Malayalam. Anyway, that's not the point. My point is that Kerala provides you a great test case. So is that being used as a template to look ahead? What is your sense?
Not as yet. I think they're dealing with challenges, but nobody's trying to think of structures, frameworks, and policies which could become a learning ground for entire India. There are some semblances of some people paying attention, which I will talk about later. But to answer your question, nobody's paying attention to it. They're currently battling with the issue and not thinking of creating, for example, private-public partnerships to address the issue, right? Should we look at preventive healthcare to address the healthcare burden, right? And Kerala is a fantastic, state for alternate forms of, wellness as well. But to answer the question, no, nobody's paying attention to it as yet.
Okay. So Rajit, before we just take a deep dive into the solutions to this challenge, I just want to stay on this context a little more. My reading of the data, maybe it's wrong, correct me, is that India is aging much faster than what we have been led to believe. You see, well, like I put out in the intro, fertility levels are falling.
Yeah.
In fact, in some states, it's less than replacement levels. Bihar and UP are holding the flag for India in terms of population growth. So we are not seeing the impact in macro numbers. Secondly, longevity has gone up, which leads to another related problem that women are outliving men for the first time in India, which is a natural phenomenon worldwide, but in India it was not. So we are also looking at, if we look at traditional marriage, a widowing of India problem, right? So the problem is that all our data is based on the 2011 census.
Correct.
The new numbers are not with us. So am I fair in making the surmise that we are actually aging much faster? And I'll add the atomistic families and urban living into this mix, delayed pregnancies, delayed marriages.
Yeah. I think if you use the word aging not in a physical context, I would say yes, India is aging much faster than we can see. Let me give you a few anecdotes and data. So every 2 years we do a survey called the State of Seniors in India at a Max India level. So remember my 2020 survey, an astounding number of 25% seniors staying alone came to us from the top 10 cities. I never expected that. Because still in my mind the paradigm was the good old joint family system, community care, mohalla living, no longer there. Of course, after COVID that number came down, but that stopped me for a minute, right? So there's no doubt in the top 30 cities, the traditional models of care of joint family and community have totally broken down. There are nuclear families. The millennials that don't want kids for various reasons, whatever they are, not getting into that, as of now. Fertility rate is down, below 2. Expectancy has gone up in terms of life expectancy is about 68, 69 now. But so has disease burden. We used to hear about India being the cardiac capital or diabetes capital, now it's oncology. Mental disorders, right? So 40% of seniors are complaining of cardiac or vision impairment, 40% have diabetes, 17% have mental disorders which are still underdiagnosed because it's a taboo to diagnose mental disorders. So I think India is surely aging much faster. The traditional systems are not able to cater to this entire issue. And look at it from any perspective, right? From disease burden perspective, from loneliness perspective, from isolation perspective. The census is not doing justice to what's on the ground, right? That's my view.
So fair enough. Tell me, when you said 10 metros, 10 cities, then you said 30.
Top 30.
So we are looking at, what about rural India? Does a survey extend there?
No, we haven't done that. But if you simply extrapolate, right, you'll find the problem far worse. On that side.
Okay, but we can presume that social structures preserve longer in rural India than in urban India because of atomistic living, rental costs, etc.
But I think digital intrusion has perhaps caused that phenomena to go a little bit the other side.
Okay, meaning?
Meaning that the availability of information, therefore the migration out of the younger people. looking for pastures which are, so agriculture is no longer in fashion. That's what I meant.
Right.
And that's why you find that the burden on the rural side perhaps will be far worse because the economic compulsions are far worse. Yes, some systems still are preserved in terms of care, but the access of healthcare, including primary healthcare centers, is hardly there in rural India.
So it's actually a convergence of really bad circumstances. Our infrastructure is okay, coming up to par right now, but healthcare, like you said, missing in urban India, absent in rural India. Then this factor about migration, out migration. So it's a sorry convergence of factors. But there's another way of looking at it. I mean, I'm a guy who believes every cloud has a silver lining. So from a business point of view, which is also one of your hats is the business hat in health. So do you believe that this social time bomb that we are looking at is also an opportunity, and some call it the silver economy?
I think it's a great opportunity to rethink, reframe, and reimagine, our structures, policies, and frameworks around this changing demography of India. And it's a great opportunity. Let me give you some numbers. So when I joined from healthcare and came into senior care in 2019, the first thing we did was I said, okay, let's size up what's the opportunity really. And we did a 8-week survey along with McKinsey, and we discovered there was a 10 to 12 billion dollar, seniors opportunity in various value pools. The largest one was $3.9 billion of care at home services for seniors, right? Another $4 billion of, I was surprised, online financial services, for seniors. $1.1 billion of assisted living, and $750 million of aids that patients use for their convenience, right? There were 4 very large value pools. Then in 2024, Niti Aayog released a paper for senior care reforms where they themselves said it's a $7 billion opportunity. Then came JLL with an estimate of how many senior living housing will India need. They said about 18 lakh units by 2030. And we hardly have 50,000 currently, ready or under construction. So that's a $5 billion opportunity. Then sometime in 23, we did a survey on saying that how are seniors looking after their wellness, because we wanted to introduce some products for chronic disease management for seniors. And we went and interviewed about 3,000 people across 10 cities, and we discovered that they were spending about 3,000 per month, so about 40,000 a year on wellness, not hospitalization, right? Now that if you multiply the SEC-B only top 30 cities is a $5 billion opportunity.
Okay.
So any way you look at it, and sometimes I think, what's the point in trying to count, drops in an ocean? It's an ocean of opportunity, right? So I think there are various opportunities. So let's trace from another perspective. Let's look at a customer journey of a senior, right? Because seniors' needs change with age, medical condition, and circumstance. So if you're living alone but you're relatively healthy, you will prefer to stay in a senior living community where you have all the safety, security, primary healthcare services, engagement services to keep you mentally, and physically active. It's a great way to spend your senior years. But if you need more intrusive, care because you went through an episode like a cardiac bypass, a transplant, right? Or you have age-related issues of mobility and you need help in feeding, bathing, etc. Then you look at care homes where you can have 24/7 nursing cover, you have nutrition, you have more care on that side. If you have dementia, then there are memory care homes for you, right? Or you look at care at home services. But sometimes you also need some aids for your convenience, a walking stick for mobility, for example, a walker, a wheelchair, a diaper, right, or a brace for your knee or ankle, right? There are products and services. So actually, if you start to trace this journey, there's so much of opportunity to create. On top of that, then you have people doing second innings employment for seniors. So new verticals come up. It was never there, 5 years back. Right?
Again? Yeah.
So there are two interventions. One, the government set up a portal called Sacred, which is Senior Able Citizens for Re-employment in Dignity, where they want to have people post all the vacancies on this portal, and the seniors can look at it and apply. There's an interesting a new startup in Bangalore called Wisdom Circle, where the entrepreneur is trying to create Neeraj's name, a marketplace where you have seniors on one side who are eligible or want to be employed, and employees on the other side, and connect the two.
Okay, like an aggregator.
Like an aggregator. Then there are remote monitoring system for seniors, emergency response system for seniors. There are people creating communities for seniors like Khayal and Genwise and Smiling Souls to engage them. So look at the entire ecosystem now, right? Actually, it's an integrated care ecosystem around the senior. To me, that's the opportunity to rethink what a senior will face. So let me ask you a question. If an elder in your family needed a wheelchair and I asked you which one you will buy, you will struggle to give me a name.
So true.
You will know, right? Do you know of any geriatric specialist? You will say, no, I know an orthopedic surgeon, I know oncologist, I know neurologist, but what is this geriatrician, right? That's the opportunity, right? So while you call it a business, I think it's a great opportunity to serve. That's the way I would put it.
But tell me, Rajit, you've laid it out so well, but at the same time, you said there is a big gap. So like senior assisted living, you said there are only 50,000 homes, whereas you need
Senior living, yeah.
Senior 50, you need 30 lakhs, right?
18 lakhs.
18 lakhs by 2030. So what is the problem? Why is this, from all that you told me, it seems like a great opportunity. So is there a risk-reward problem here, or what is it?
No, I think the sector is in a very nascent stages because frankly, we don't have structures and frameworks which encourage investors to look at it, right? There is no one ministry looking after seniors. There's a Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, there's a Ministry of Healthcare, and a Ministry of Urban Housing, right? There's no nodal agency. There is no insurance, and therefore funding of retirement is not there, right? So that lack of standardization and policies, which will get covered up, I hope, right, is causing people not to look at it. But senior living as a category has taken off now. And let me give you a few examples. So earlier you heard of Ashiana only, perhaps, as senior living. Now you have Antara. You have intergenerational living for the first time in Gurgaon with Max Estate Antara is doing. You have Primus Mantri, you have Columbia Pacific, you have Prestige wanting to enter, you have Pioneer. There are so many people.
I believe in LIC has a...
So there's so many people entering this sector because now this product has taken off. So when we launched our first community in 2013 in Dehradun, right, we took 7-8 years to sell the 197 units. When we launched Noida, 340 units, took 2.5-3 years. We launched 300 units in Gurgaon, took 9 months. So it gives you an indication of how this product has now seen acceptability amongst developers and amongst the seniors who feel this is the way to live, right? So I think this is a journey we are on. It takes a decade to prepare a country, for this phenomena, but surely it has started.
Okay. This, you just mentioned earlier about one opportunity is PPPs,
Yeah.
right? So now that you have mentioned the gaps, so is there a public policy twist or enabler that can provide or galvanize, investments, private investments in this sector?
Yes, I think there are 3 or 4 things, and that's the advocacy we're trying to do with the Niti Aayog. One, there must be some kind of financial solution, right? Whether it is reverse mortgage, which never took off in India. Outside India, you can, do a mortgage on your house and live happily thereafter. India, it never took off for several reasons, right? Titles, litigation, etc. Insurance. Thank God now you have health insurance beyond 70 years. Ayushman Bharat covers 70 years, right? More and more products are needed like that. Of immediate annuity, for example. You buy something today and you get annuity for life till you live. So you fund your expenses, of that kind. Or you buy a senior living house today and there's insurance bundled in it, which takes care of your expenses. So things like that have to be reimagined. Secondly, we must have standardization. So proper policy. So Maharashtra RERA did take out a checklist of minimum standards to which we contributed. ASLI itself has taken out a voluntary checklist saying that all people doing senior housing must adhere to these standards. Grant Thornton will then audit the developer, and if Grant Thornton gives a thumbs up, ASLI will issue a certificate of excellence. So for the customer, there is some semblance of trust, right? Then we worked very hard with NABH, which is the certifying authority for hospitals, to take out the standards for care homes. They've released that. And we became the first care home to get a standardization, get a certification. We want more and more certification and standards. So the customer is, assured of a minimum standard, and the investors feel confident, right? Third, I think there must be some policies around capacity creation, for care. We don't have enough nurses in hospitals. Like we say, it takes 1.5% to take care of a child. So is true for a senior. I've been a caregiver to my parents. It takes more than one person. So where are these crores of caregivers going to come from? So what should we do in that frame, right? So I think we have to rethink these policies. Talk about infrastructure. Look around you. Is the public infrastructure in place or senior friendly? Whether it's transport or malls or shopping complexes, no, we are not, right? So I think it's a great opportunity for a public-private participation because everything can't be done by one player. We'll have to come together. So whether the government creates the infrastructure and gives it to private operators to operate, right, could be one model, right, which we're examining. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to rethink and transform.
But the conversation has begun, is what you're saying.
Has begun, because now we have the National Policy for Older Persons was a way 1999 old draft. A new draft has been taken out now. I talked about Maharashtra RERA. The Haryana government introduced a policy called MALF, Medico Assisted Living Facilities, where they've allowed care homes to be set up in residential facilities with some standards to be followed, right? So slowly, I think we are getting there. The UP government has set up a senior, advisory council for promoting the sector. Dr. Vinod Paul from Niti Aayog has been tasked with developing the sector. So slowly, you can find, things coming in place, but much more needs to be done.
Yeah, I think they need to make some dramatic statement, like you said, a ministry for senior living, or some,
Absolutely.
metaphorical claim has to be made. I think Kerala should begin by creating a ministry purely for this because they are facing the challenge. And it's frightening what you said. This little earlier you mentioned about sacred and wisdom circle, right? So this is a very interesting phenomenon because we are looking at the sad story about aging. But what we ignore very often is that, especially today, because technology is leapfrogging so much that redundancy grows in our minds. But what we often ignore is the institutional knowledge a lot of these people carry with them. So, they may not want to do a full-time job, but they have enormous institutional memory and experience which can be tapped. So, besides these two, the sacred, tell me what's the feedback on sacred and what is the feedback on wisdom circle?
See, wisdom circle is now gaining, traction, slowly. I can get you the numbers of how many people they have placed already, right? But if you look at it from another perspective, seniors control about $15 trillion of purchasing power by 2030. That's a large number. I mean, now 70 is the new 60.
True.
Right? Slowly, people have started to relook at retirement ages. So, healthcare is now 65 for administrative staff. For doctors, there's no retirement age, right? For example. So, I think the dial is shifting slowly. And if you take various professions, right? Is there a retirement age for healthcare professionals? No. Retirement age for entrepreneurs? No. Retirement age for farmers? No. Right? So I'm saying, what is this concept of retirement? Just because you turn 60, right? All it means is you pivot and perhaps make choices in life which are different from what you made earlier. That's all there is. But we are seeing a lot of people, let's say in Dehradun in our community, who are volunteering. They are mentoring startups. They are starting new businesses. I just had a friend who retired from a huge technology company, started another company on artificial intelligence, right? So I think people are, experimenting and wanting to stay mentally active. So there's a lot of purchasing power and a lot of wisdom that resides, in this, right? So I often think that is there any way we can leverage a senior for a senior? So imagine that in every community, if you had a senior who was educating seniors about what's available for them, the credibility of that person would be quite different from us trying to do all performance marketing and ads.
So true.
Right? So that's where I think we should head.
So finally, Rajit, the beginning you had mentioned about the fact that India's public policy is in a classic, rut. It is reactive and never proactive. There have been instances where it's proactive. Whether you look at Operation Sindoor, whether you look at dealing with drought, whether you look at dealing with environmental damage, it's always reactive. So proactiveness should be the mantra in dealing with this, right?
Absolutely. As I said, it takes a decade to prepare. And there are 4 or 5 dimensions we can be proactive on, very easily actually. One is start thinking about the financial solutions today. Right? I know it takes a lot of time for insurance companies to have data to create policies that underwrite. but the movement can start, and the movement has started already. There's dialogue around that. Rethink reverse mortgage, for example. Rethink preventive healthcare. And we are so beautifully, as a country, we can leverage all the traditional systems of medicine along with modern medicine to be able to look at screening, diagnosis, remote monitoring, devices. We release a very interesting watch which detects a fall. So if a fall happens, a call will go to the caregiver, the GPS location. So all the devices we can use for remote monitoring, given the lack of caregivers that we have. So rethink, healthcare, and say, what should we do? Look at geriatric, specialities. And the reason I say that, for a senior, you can go to a specialist, but the specialist traditionally looks at your organ and symptom. But unfortunately for a senior, he or she has several issues to be dealt with, right? You could have hypertension, you could diabetes, a joint problem, frozen shoulder, so many things. So you need a person who can look at you holistically and say what needs to be done. Because as you age, you face muscle loss, you face fall risk, you have frailty. So to look at supplements, look at diet, look at nutrition, look at mental wellness. So you need a whole new approach to healthcare. Then look at infrastructure, right? Public transport, public places, how to make them friendly, right? Should we comply with the American Disability Act? Should we have wheelchair access everywhere? Should we have ramps? Should we have anti-skid tiles, grab bars? Rethink, infrastructure, right? And rethink the caregiving, will never solve the issue of number of caregivers. So my favorite theory is, can we rope in the domestic workers, the domestic staff? They are taking care of seniors in any case. So why don't we run refresher programs for them every 3 months, incentivize them to attend, and therefore create a huge workforce? So I think one has to be a little bit creative and hatke to be able to rethink. It's a multi-dimensional issue. But if you think at these 4-5 things, I think we can get there in another few years.
Also, a lot of them can be encouraged to do side hustles, outside the core job,
Absolutely.
which helps them grow.
Absolutely.
A great note to sign off. Thank you, Rajit, for being with us today.
And thank you, Anil. Thank you.
So, Rajit, is what we started out with, the initial premise was a very worrying story about India's aging problem, which doesn't get the kind of attention that it should. But towards the end of the conversation, Rajat has pivoted our thinking to the belief that it's actually, yes, a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. And even better, given the convergence of technology, India's audacious ambition to become a developed economy by 2047, the fixing of basics like electricity, toilets, drinking water, there is a circumstance and an ecosystem which India can exploit to ensure that our elders live not just with health, but with dignity and purpose. I believe, seen this way, the silver economy can be India's next frontier growth area. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to Strat News Global on YouTube. Hit the bell icon so that you don't miss any updates. And please do share your thoughts, ideas and suggestions with us. I'm available on Twitter at Capital Calculus. I'll be back next week with another episode. Till then, stay safe.